Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and I'm here to tell you that we finally made it. It's week one start sit time, baby. We're helping you get your lineup set, making sure you don't fall into the traps that could be unideal player usage. We're diving into some potentially good or bad matchups as well. We got an absolute legend in the house to help me and, of course, to help you and make sure you come away with a W in week one and kick your season off on the right foot. So let's get it. All right, folks, it's that wonderful time of year where all of our fantasy teams are currently undefeated, and we want to keep that streak going. So, helping you get your lineup set for week one, I am very honored to welcome a legendary IDP and football writer from Bleacher Report, Football Guys, The Athletic, Fantasy Sharks, and so many more. But most importantly is that despite all of his many writing obligations, he's been very generous enough with his time that he's willing to come on here week one to talk some IDP with me, the godfather of IDP himself, Gary Davenport. Gary, how are you, good sir?
Oh, after that music and it's week one, I'm ready to run through a wall. Let's hit something.
Absolutely. This is definitely the peak of excitement season, right? Where we haven't had football in however many months it's been now. So, and preseason football's been there, but it doesn't quite count, right? Like we could finally set our fantasy lineups. We got some excitement going. Again, like I said, we're all undefeated right now, so this is where everybody's optimistic, everybody's tuned in, and hopefully we can get them right for week one here and get those lineups set. So really appreciate you coming on here. I'm excited to do this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And like you said, it's a great time of year. I mean, I'll be angry come Monday because
Sure.
for some reason, dating back to when I started playing fantasy football a very long time ago, week one has not been kind to me ever. So in a few days, I'll be wondering where it all went wrong. But right now, hope is alive. So.
Hope is definitely alive for now, right? And yeah, the regular season does have a tendency to remind us of the frustration and everything that else that comes with fantasy football. But I'm sure you're not the only one that week one can be a struggle, right? Until we actually see some of the usage and things like that. It's difficult to kind of get a grasp on what is going on in the offseason, especially with a lot of these teams in the preseason and stuff, not really showing us their hand exactly and how they're going to deploy their players. So until we actually see it on the field, it can be a tricky one. So hopefully we're going to help people sort that out this week. And typically how we kind of do these weekly preview shows, or at least how we did them last year in season, was kind of go game by game, look at matchups as well as like utilization of those key players who require analysis for starting lineups. But heading into week one, it's always a little different, right? Since we don't have true matchup data or utilization for every single team, so we're going to rely on the information that we do have from the off season or preseason and look at some of the kind of safe starts for our lineups, and we'll have some matchup stuff in there as well, and talk about some of the players who we're maybe completely avoiding or at least waiting until we know that they're safe by kind of holding them out of our week one lineups, because oftentimes it's just not worth the risk the first week of the year to risk some players with bigger question marks in our lineup. So kind of who are the safer, better bets heading into week one? That will be a lot of the focus for us this week, and hopefully you guys find it helpful. But if you're looking for more, I'll include the link to my week one rankings in the episode description, and you can always feel free to drop start sit questions in the YouTube comments, and I'll be happy to get to those as soon as possible. And all I ask is you like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate that. All right, before we get started, though, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at DraftKings. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the number one place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown or hit their over on tackle props if you're interested in that kind of thing for the IDP crowd. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet only $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends September 19th. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms. All right, Mr. Davenport, the people are hungry for that NFL action and ready to set those lineups. So let's give them some start-sit decisions to ponder heading into the first game of the season. Let's start with the defensive lineman. Who is your first IDP DL to highlight as a start this week?
Oh, now John Greenard is probably going to be a weekly starter for most managers most weeks. I mean, he was probably drafted as either a low-end DL1 or a high-end DL2. But you have to love him this week. I love Andrew Van Ginkel this week, which one of the weirdest stats from last season was that Andrew Van Ginkel had a higher pressure rate than TJ Watt, which is just, it makes my head hurt a little bit. But that's okay, because, and the simple fact is they're going up against the New York Giants team that gave up 85 sacks last year. Now, are the Giants hopeful that their offensive line will be better this year than last? Yeah, because if they give up 85 sacks again, they won't have to worry about benching Daniel Jones. He'll die.
Right.
But it's still 85 sacks is 85. That's 5 sacks a game every game. So I would not surprise me a bit to see Greenard and Van Ginkel get home this week.
Yeah, I mean, I love that call. Like you said, the Giants' offensive line was Swiss cheese last year. They did bring in like Jermaine Illuminor, Greg Van Roten, as well as John Runyon, but they're still far from like the best unit in the league, right? We have them ranked, I think, as like the 28th best offensive line this year. So really only a minor improvement from last year, if any. Plus Daniel Jones, like you said, like at quarterback was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league in allowing pressures to turn into sacks. He had a 31.6% pressure to sack conversion rate, which was second in the NFL behind only his teammate, Tommy DeVito. I called him Danny DeVito. So Jonathan Greenard and AVG both get a lot of opportunities here this week. I love this call. There's certain guys like where, you're probably starting them, but there's points where you have like really tough decisions or, you want to move them into that top tier kind of thing. And I think this makes sense for both of these guys, really. Okay, I've got a similar one here where, again, I'm maybe looking at somebody that's likely going to be a starter for you anyways, but one where, again, I'm pushing him into that higher range for this week anyways, and it's Montez Sweat of the Chicago Bears, where, again, going up against a offensive line and a quarterback situation that isn't likely to be amazing again this year like last year. So Montez Sweat specifically going up against right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere. Frere played 66 pass blocking snaps last season. That was it. And it was a disaster. He allowed 11 pressures and 3 sacks on those plays. He earned a 27.8 pass blocking grade on the year. So not good. Not to say that he can't improve this season, but it's just not encouraging enough that it'll be able to stop Montez Sweat, who was actually quite good last season, delivered a career year in terms of pass rush production, should get plenty of snaps all season long. So he's one of my top plays this week. I believe I have him as like edge 8 right now. You look at Will Levis as well, was also below average in terms of pressure to sack conversion rate at 21.5% last season. So, I expect improvement from Will Levis this year, but those types of numbers at least kind of tend to stick a little bit better year to year, and could be something for Montez Sweat to take advantage of this week. So that's one of my favorite kind of first matchups of the year to kind of look at this week.
Oh, I absolutely hope you're right, because I have a lot of shares of Montez Sweat. Just one of those guys that I just, I'd throw a couple linebackers on my roster, and then I'm like, okay, it's time to start looking at the edge rushers.
Right.
and Sweat was there. And like
Yeah.
you said, he was great last year. Had that career year. Not only did he have a career year, but he switched teams mid-season and did not miss a beat. And the difference he made in that Bears defense, the pre-Sweat Bears and the post-Sweat Bears were two entirely different defenses.
Yeah, it was really impressive, especially considering that like the defensive line that he went to from Washington, where he had Jonathan Allen, Chase Young, Deron Payne, to what Chicago had last year. And he was still, like you said, as effective as he was, if not slightly better too. I think it was really impressive by Sweat. So I found that really encouraging for him as well, heading into this year. I think it could be another nice year for Montez Sweat. All right, you got another set of pass rushers here in a matchup to take advantage of. Who do you like out of New Orleans?
Yeah, another double dip attacking a terrible team. Again, Carl Granderson is a guy who's going to be a starter for most. If he's not in most starting lineup, he will be here in 3 or 4 weeks when people become hip to Carl Granderson. And the fact that he can give you 10, 12 sack upside, and he had 78 total tackles last year, which is a lot for an edge rusher. But Chase Young has impressed in camp. I know that Demario Davis had talked him up big time, mentioned him as a potential defensive player of the year candidate, which I don't know if I'm going to go that far. But maybe he does, maybe we see that he quietly last year tied his career high in sacks, 7.5, which is the same he had when he won Rookie of the Year. So, maybe he's finally rounding back into shape after that injury that, took essentially 2 seasons away from him. Mm-hmm. But they're playing, and I know the Carolina Panthers spent a lot of money on the interior of the offensive line. And I know that, of course, they're hopeful that Bryce Young takes a major step forward, because if he doesn't, picking him over CJ Stroud is just going to look that much worse. But again, we're talking about a team that I think allowed 65 sacks last year, and I don't see them being that much better that it's not still the kind of pass rush matchup that you want to attack.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I would definitely be in on this young on young crime this week here with Chase Young going up against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. And I'm feeling pretty encouraged about Chase Young as well. Like I thought last year, like his pass rush numbers were actually pretty solid. Like and then even going to a new team here in New Orleans, like the Saints actually did show us kind of what they might do with their pass rushers this preseason, where they allowed all 3 of those guys, Cameron Jordan, Carl Granderson, Chase Young, to all get on the field and play like what could be IDP relevant snaps across an entire week's worth of games. So I'm with you. I would definitely be looking at Granderson or Young, probably before Cam Jordan. Jordan would be third on that list. Not that Jordan's bad, but Granderson and Young both have youth and ability still to their advantage here. But Young specifically, I think deserved probably more sacks than he ended up with last year, just based on his play, which I think has allowed him to kind of fly under the radar a bit this offseason. But I like his chances this week against Bryce Young and the Panthers. So hopefully gets off to a nice start, and we start to see a little bit more of that, second overall pick that he was from 2020, I think it was now.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah. All right. So let's stick in the same game here for one of my picks. And I went with Jadeveon Clowney of the Carolina Panthers. So he's going up against Trevor Penning this week. Another guy that I think I like the opportunity for Clowney in this game and really for the season. I mean, specifically again against Trevor Penning, who will be forced into a starting role with Ryan Ramczyk out. Penning is a 2022 first round pick, but has limited experience as a starter. He played a career high 245 pass blocking snaps last season, which resulted in 19 pressures and 4 sacks allowed, which is a pretty high rate. And Clowney stands out along that Carolina defensive line as a guy that is going to play a ton this season next to Derek Brown, right? Like they also just released Kayvon Chason, who not like he was going to be a starter or anything, but it's just another player out of that edge rotation there where Clowney could soak up even more volume. I do wonder, could this be the year that Clowney finally gets double-digit sacks? He's come so close multiple times. He's had 9 or 9.5, including 9.5 last year, but never 10 or more than that. So I thought, his season last year was pretty good. Posted a career high 81.2 pass rush grade, a career high 71 pressures, and then tied his career high in sacks. And he did that on just 653 snaps, which was not a career high for him. So I'm thinking that the snaps could potentially increase if he's healthy this season and starts, with a nice matchup this week against Trevor Penning and the Saints. So I'm feeling pretty good about Jadeveon Clowney heading into the year.
Can't argue that. And it bothers me sometimes because people will label Clowney a bust. And I don't know that he's been a bust. I mean, yes, he was the first overall pick. And everyone went crazy over that video where he knocked a Michigan player's head off.
Right.
But he's had a really good career. I mean,
yeah.
And dude, you know what? We're going to mark it. We're going to book it. He gets his 10 sacks this year. He cracks it. Clowney gets it done.
Let's go. All right. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try to find that prop bet now and see if we can hit Jadeveon Clowney 10 or more sacks on the season now.
You might be able to get some juice for 10 sacks.
I think so. I think you could definitely find it. I'm going to check it out after. All right, let's go with another one of your picks. Who do you got out of Tampa Bay?
I don't know if this is just an excuse for me to say yada as many times as I can. It's a guy that I've loved all summer long. It showed a lot of potential last year as a rookie. Now, with Shaq Barrett's gone, he's going to slide into a full-time role. And again, we're talking about a team in the Commanders that allowed, I believe, 65 sacks last year. They do have a new quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Yes, Jaden Daniels is a very mobile quarterback, but young quarterbacks tend to hold the ball too long, and mobile young quarterbacks tend to really hold the ball too long. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Jaden Daniels goes out this season and, puts up some wild rushing stats and helps fantasy managers on the offensive side of the ball while simultaneously being sacked 60-something times. Would not surprise me one bit. Diaby's the best pass rusher the Buccaneers have, with, all due respect to Joe Tryon. And I think he's going to hit double-digit sacks this year, probably crack 50 tackles, and wind up being a solid DL2 that people could get cheap in drafts over the summer.
Yeah, I think he's going to play a ton this season. They really don't have much of a choice, right? And he's young enough, and he showed some potential last year, like you said. And I think like all of Washington's offensive tackles are injured at the moment as well, which kind of helps his case, or banged up somehow. But yeah, you mentioned, Jaden Daniels too, like having that longer time to throw. I thought it was really interesting from the preseason. Like he had one of the quickest times to throw in the preseason, which I think was just by design, right? I think that was the coaching staff just making sure that he got the ball out quickly and didn't take any unnecessary hits, right? And basically eliminated the scrambling and the rushing from his game for that, the limited snaps that he played there. It was like 1.91 seconds time to throw, which is insanely fast for a quarterback, especially a rushing one. But I don't think that that's something that's going to carry over into the regular season, because you just don't take that, that scrambling and rushing ability out of his game. So he's going to want to hold the ball a little bit longer, and definitely going to be a tendency that we see from a lot of rookies, but especially, like you said, those rushing quarterbacks as well. So I like the call here as well. Last one for me, I went with DeMarcus Lawrence. We talked about DeMarcus Lawrence last week. Adam was on the show. We were talking about dark horse edges to greatly outperform their expectations. And Adam loved DeMarcus Lawrence. And I really like DeMarcus Lawrence for this week as well. And another one of those guys that's kind of flown under the radar a little bit while still playing at like a really high level. If he's going to have that kind of one final big year, then I think it starts here in week 1 against the Browns. So there's two things about this matchup that I like quite a bit. One is that the Browns are still going to run the ball a fair bit. And DeMarcus Lawrence was an excellent run defender last season and was able to deliver strong tackle numbers because of that. I expect that to kind of hold up this season and into this week as well. And the other part of it is that he gets a decent matchup against a Browns offensive line that I think is very good, but they were banged up like crazy last year. I think there's some question marks about how these guys are going to do coming off injury. Like Jedrick Wills, he's another one of those former first-round picks at offensive tackle who's had his struggles a little bit and dealt with injuries. I think he can be better this season, but this is a tough match to do that in week 1 against the Cowboys, in my opinion, who, even without Dan Quinn, still boast a pretty fearsome pass rush with between DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons, obviously. So yeah, Jedrick Wills struggled a bit while in the lineup last year. He allowed 29 pressures, 3 sacks, just a 60.1 pass blocking grade. Deshaun Watson as well also has a tendency to allow pressures to turn into sacks at a higher rate than most quarterbacks at 20.8%. And Deshaun Watson had the 3rd longest time to throw in the league last season at 3.13 seconds. So, potentially deeper league play here for sure. But, talking about some of the sits in a second who we'll hear for, guys that are probably drafted higher than DeMarcus Lawrence, who I might not feel as comfortable with starting. I think DeMarcus Lawrence could be somebody that makes it into starting lineups this week.
I'll buy that. It's just, every time you say Deshaun Watson as a Browns fan, I just want to kind of hang my head.
Yeah,
sigh.
it's going to be a big year for him. I mean, he's got to stay healthy, right? Yeah, that's first and foremost.
I'm just wondering what the over/under is on what's the first week that famous Jameis is out there starting for Cleveland.
Oh man, that would be that would be pretty devastating.
Hey, we went through Joe Flacco's corpse last year, so
and Flacco was good.
Jameis can't be any worse. I'm a Browns. I've given up all hope. Hope and being a Browns fan just don't go together very well. So
yeah, you got to set expectations low. Yeah,
abandon it. Embrace that everything will go horribly wrong, and just enjoy the ride.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. It's you don't want to get hurt anymore, right? I think that's definitely fair.
Many times.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, let's look at some of our sits here on the defensive line. And Gary, I love that you are starting us off with a spicy pick here. Who is your first sit on the defensive line out of Detroit?
I don't know that you really can sit Aiden Hutchinson of the Detroit Lions. I mean, obviously, he's a fantastic player, was drafted as a top 10 defensive lineman. Unless you've got crazy depth, you're probably not going to sit him. But you're also probably not going to get a great stat line. I mean, luckily, he's such a good edge setter and run defender that he's probably not going to goose egg you. You'll get a couple solos and an assist or something in the box score, because you don't want – in week 1, you don't want to look at the box score and see that you got the dreaded donut. Nobody likes the IDP donut. Right. But Matthew Stafford just doesn't get sacked. And I don't know that I expect that to change this week. That's one of the games I'm really looking forward to. I think that Sunday night game is going to be exciting. Yeah. I think a lot of points are going to get scored. I think the ball is going to be thrown all over the field. I think there's going to be wide receivers and running backs racking up fantasy points. But I don't know that I see either team racking up a lot of sacks.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And you're right about Stafford too. Like, he does a pretty good job at avoiding sacks, and it's not like the offensive line is bad either in Los Angeles. I know they're not, quite what they were with Whitworth and everything, but they're like a good enough pass blocking unit that I don't think they're, a major concern either. And Hutchinson, like, I love Hutchinson, obviously for this season. He's one of my highest ranked players, coming into the year, but I can definitely see it. There's gonna be those weeks where he just doesn't perform, and against the Rams, and like you just laid out, I think that's definitely possible. So yeah, this is like you said, probably not a lot of people, benching him, but maybe for like those lineups where we're playing in like the brouhaha, for example, where you could only start one player per week, or one player per year. I can't remember how I'm describing it terribly, but
you could start a player once per season.
That's the way to say it. You're maybe not putting Aiden Hutchinson in a lineup there, for example, but that's a good call. So let's go on to one of my picks here. So this is one where I don't have the slide for him, but anyways, this is one where I think I'm kind of split on Bryce Huff of the Philadelphia Eagles for week 1. I guess for this season, but not necessarily for week 1. He's still going to be a sit for me in week 1, but I think his season could be one where he has like these kind of wide range of results, right? And may end up closer to the either the low or the high end of that, because I see him as kind of this boom bust type player, like a really good pass rusher for sure. We've seen that from him in a limited sample size, but almost no impact on early downs and against the run. Like, so his floor is zero essentially, right? Like you said, that he has that zero floor potential. The Eagles coaching staff as well, Vic Fangio specifically, talked about how he'd need to improve on those rundowns to get used there. So I don't think that, that's in the cards for him for early in his Eagles career. So again, it just cuts away a lot of his potential production floor. So it really just comes down to pass rush potential for him this week, going up against a Packers team that doesn't have David Bakhtiari anymore, but there's still another solid offensive line, and Jordan Love, who was top 5 at avoiding sacks last season as far as pressure to sack conversion rate. So I'm just somewhat skeptical, I guess, about playing time for Bryce Huff as well as the matchup, where I just don't know if I'm risking him in a lineup in week 1, because I know he was a player that a lot of people were excited about. I saw him go high in a lot of drafts, so he's a sit for me, at least for week 1.
Agreed. I mean, I like Huff for the season, and I agree that he's a guy who I think you're going to have to deal with some ups and downs, but no, not this week, not against Green Bay.
How about we've talked about a lot of highly drafted edge rushers here this week, but you got another one here, Gary, out of Jacksonville. What do you think about Trayvon Walker going against the Dolphins?
I could say essentially the same thing about Trayvon Walker I just said about Bryce Huff. I like him for the season. I expect he's going to take, another step forward after what we saw last year, where he cracked double-digit sacks and posted a career high in tackles, although the tackle numbers were okay. They weren't anything to jump up and down about. It's just, again, it's a matter of matchup. Tua Tagovailoa is just not a quarterback that gets sacked a ton. I think because the last couple of times he got sacked, he wound up in the hospital. And he's just decided he doesn't want to do that anymore. So he gets rid of the ball. But it's just not a guy that I see. I can't see Walker this week as more than probably a low end DL2, high end DL3. And, whereas Hutchinson is so ferocious in all facets of the game that he's probably going to get you, that 3 or 4 tackles. Walker's the kind of guy where in a bad matchup, you could be looking at it afterward and you're like, oh, great, I got an assist. That's awesome. Thank you for that half a point.
Yeah, that's the thing with Trayvon Walker, right? Like, there's volume, at least for him, where he's probably going to play a lot of snaps, but there's not necessarily somebody to rely on in a bad matchup like this against Miami. Like you said, Tua Tagovailoa, he had the fastest time to throw in the league last year, and I think a lot of that has to do with, like you said, just taking those hits and getting injured, so keeping himself safe. So the other thing with Walker, like, as much as I like the volume there for him for like season long, I think he could still be good. Like, he wasn't nearly as good as like his pass rush production would indicate, right? Like 58.1 pass rush grade. That was actually lower than his rookie year, which was 59.0. I think like he's still young enough that he's going to develop and improve, right? He has that athletic ability that we knew we kind of had to wait on to match up to his pass rush ability. So I'm not expecting, I guess, immediate results here. But I think that it will come with time and potentially across the entire season. But yeah, I'm with you in that week 1, probably not the time to bank on him. All right. Another guy that was kind of somewhat of an overperformer last year as well. I got Byron Young of the Los Angeles Rams on my list here as a potential sit. So I think it is fair to probably expect some regression for Byron Young after, a pretty strong rookie season where he had 7 sacks. Like, to me, looking at this matchup against Detroit, I think that likely comes almost immediately, that regression as far as I'm concerned here with this matchup. So he's going up against Taylor Decker and some Penei Sewell as well. So this is I think, the best offensive line in the NFL. I think a lot of people have them ranked that way. I know I would. I know PFF has them ranked that way. So again, just a really tough matchup. No Aaron Donald again this season. So that is a big part of that defensive line that drew a lot of attention to open things up for these pass rushers in years past. And I think is something that Byron Young specifically is going to have to deal with a little bit. But then also, Jared Goff, again, who was top 5 at not allowing pressures to turn into sacks last year. He got the ball out really quickly. So I think this is a situation where, again, I like Byron Young. I think, again, another volume heavy play, but I don't trust them as much this week. It's another run heavy offense as well, Detroit. So just limited opportunities for Young to get those kind of big plays like sacks. So he's going to be on benches for me, at least where I can afford to bench him. Okay, how about another guy that you put on your sit list here, Gary? New Atlanta Falcon, Matthew Judon.
Yeah, Judon. I mean, I hope we see the Matt Judon from 2 years ago again in 2024, and maybe we will. I mean, obviously, the Atlanta Falcons hope that they will.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't be surprised that they went and pulled the trigger on the deal for Judon. There wasn't a team in the NFL that more desperately needed anybody on the edge than Atlanta. I don't love the matchup against Pittsburgh. I know Pittsburgh's offensive line is not great. It hasn't been for many, many years. But Russell Wilson's another one of those quarterbacks that just doesn't give up a lot of sacks. So, yeah, I would say Judon for me would probably be, he was getting drafted a little higher than I would have took him this year. I probably had him around DL 20, and a lot of times I've seen him go DL 15, DL 16. And again, it's not so much I don't like him this year. I just don't like him this week.
Right.
And if I had viable options, I would probably seriously consider putting in Diaby over Judon this week. And that might be a classic week 1 overthink, but that's me.
I mean, I think it's fair though, right? Like it's always hard for these players coming off like season ending injuries, like to immediately step back into their former self, right? And we don't know exactly what Judon's going to look like, especially going to a new team. So is he going to step right in, be that workhorse for a team, a team that probably wants to protect him for the, I don't want to say long term. I mean, he's almost 32 years old, but at least for a few years, if they're going to give him like a potential contract extension, right? So I don't know that he's somebody necessarily that they're going to run out there immediately for this huge number of snaps either. So I'm with you. I think Judon could just be like a wait and see type option for week 1. Okay, last defensive line sit for me. I went with Malcolm Kuntz of the Las Vegas Raiders. Going up against Rashawn Slater and the Los Angeles Chargers. So Malcolm Kuntz is one of those guys, again, that was drafted relatively high this year, likely ahead of like a DeMarcus Lawrence, for example, but draws a really tough matchup this week against Rashawn Slater and the Chargers. Slater earned a top 5 pass blocking grade last season at 84.7. And the other thing we know about the Chargers is that they're likely to be a run heavy offense under Jim Harbaugh and company there. So, you combine that with the matchup against Rashawn Slater, it just really limits the sack potential for Kuntz. Now, Kuntz was good last year as a pass rusher, so he could definitely overcome the matchup. It only takes 1 sack for him, for him to hit, right? And he was a decent tackler, so that helps his potential floor. But in those kind of big play scoring leagues, he might be someone that I'd consider passing on this week, at least for one of the better options, maybe one of our starts that we mentioned earlier for sure. All right, let's go to the linebackers now. I know people want to hear about linebackers, so let's go into your first linebacker start sit here, Gary. You got some starts here for the Dallas Cowboys. Who do you like?
Yeah, I like both Eric Kendricks and Damon Clark this week against the Cleveland Browns. And the Browns have essentially for most of the Kevin Stefanski era, they've been a team that gives up a lot of fantasy points to linebackers. It didn't change last year when Nick Chubb went down in week 2 and they went to Jerome Ford as their lead back. I don't see any reason why it will change now. The bigger question for me in Dallas is how many weeks do I have to wait for DeMarvion Overshown? Because I want him on the field.
Yeah.
So the quicker Damon Clark kind of gets pushed to the side, the happier I personally will be, given how many shares of Overshown I have stashed on benches. But I think both of those linebackers this week should be quality starts.
Yeah, the Browns were a really nice matchup for linebackers last year as well, and people were kind of afraid of the Dallas linebackers in drafts this year. I noticed they really fell down a lot of draft boards. I noticed, but I think the important thing to remember here is this is a completely different defense than it was last year under Dan Quinn. Mike Zimmer coming in, where last time we saw him run a defense, he did run two full-time linebackers, and it was a lot more IDP friendly, so to speak, for those linebackers like Eric Kendricks, who was in that defense, than it was, last year with guys like, Leighton Vander Esch and Damon Clark, and all playing like 70%, just not enough to be, consistent IDP fixtures. But I think that could definitely change that this year. And Eric Kendricks obviously going to lead the way. And whether it's Damon Clark or DeMarvion Overshone, who finishes the year, we'll have to see. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential here going up against a nice run heavy offense like the Browns. All right. So for me, one of my linebacker starts this week, my linebacker starts are fairly simple rationale, really. I'm looking for full-time guys, and Denzel Perryman of the Los Angeles Chargers is set to be a full-time guy, at least for now, right? He wore the green dot in the preseason for the Chargers. He's set for that kind of full-time role. I'm really just kind of trying to play him now while I can, before he gets injured, right? Because he's been dealing with the injuries quite a bit. Like our, brouhaha league where we could only start one player per season. He'll be in my lineup in week one, because I don't know if I'll get another chance to put him in there and feel comfortable about it. But he's somebody that I like, where if he does stay healthy this year, I think there's a lot of tackle potential there for him. But again, full-time players are the guys that I'm looking for, especially the safe bets for full-time snaps in week one, while we see the usage shake out at a lot of other different teams. But Denzel Perryman is one of the safer bets for me because he wore that green dot and looks to be set to be wearing or be in a full-time role in week one. You got another great option here as well, Gary. Who is your start in Indianapolis?
Oh, EJ Speed. Well, obviously Zaire Franklin is
Sure.
a start. You roll him out. It don't matter what the matchup is. You're
Yeah.
rolling Zaire. If you're considering sitting Zaire Franklin, I need to see the rest of your linebackers because you must be loaded.
Yeah.
It's a good, solid matchup against the Texans team. I think they're given the struggles that the Colts had against the run last year. I think Houston will probably roll out Joe Mixon quite a bit this week. And, Speed and Franklin are essentially full time. They have two linebackers on the field essentially all the time. So Speed was a popular guy during draft season. I mean, so much so that I don't know, I might have a share or two because he was being honestly overdrafted a little.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I didn't like him. And that certainly doesn't mean that he won't have a big week one, which I believe he will.
Yeah, I'm with you. Another one of those guys, just a nice, great, safe option for full-time snaps here in week one. And yeah, last time he played the Texans, he did have a double-digit tackle game to end the year last year. So that was nice to see. Different team, but it's still encouraging to a point. Another one of those full-time guys that I'm betting on this week for nice, safe snaps and somebody that I'll be plugging into lineups quite a bit is Tyrell Dodson of the Seattle Seahawks going up against the Denver Broncos. Jerome Baker's missed a lot of time this offseason. So I thought at a point Jerome Baker was going to be, the lone full-time linebacker in this defense. But it does appear that Tyrell Dodson's going to be the guy that's going to be wearing the green dot, calling the plays in the middle of the defense, which locks him into a full-time role essentially. So he's somebody that I feel pretty comfortable in starting this week and against Denver as well. Sean Payton, we know, likes to run the ball as well quite a bit. So could be a nice matchup here for Tyrell Dodson to soak up some tackles. And he would definitely be somebody that I'll be putting in my lineups over pretty much all the guys that we have as our sits coming up here in a little bit.
I have more than a few Dodson shares.
Nice.
Although, as the summer wore on, those Dodson shares seem to become more expensive for some reason.
Yeah.
It makes me angry sometimes when we all start talking about a guy. I'm like, be quiet.
Yeah.
You're driving up the price.
Yeah, it especially as we get like closer to September, those prices, just they seem to find their way to level out, and yeah, Dodson is absolutely one of those guys that people have come around on here closer to the start of the season. You got another potential green dot player here for week 1. Actually, I don't have the proper card for him, but who do you like in Miami?
It makes me a little nervous to trust David Long again because I did it last year going into the season, and then the whole Andrew Van Ginkel as an off-ball linebacker thing happened, and Long's snaps just evaporated. He played like week 1, I think it was. I think he played like 12% of the snaps, and everyone was like, "What happened?" I don't know. But then Van Ginkel moved out to the edge, and Long kicked back out there, and he actually wound up having a halfway decent season. Like you said, he's wearing the helmet communicator for the Dolphins. I think the Jaguars are going to try to run the ball as much as they can this week. If only I personally would be trying to keep Miami's offense off the field because I don't think Jacksonville's secondary can hang with that passing attack. And I don't want to have to match scores with the Dolphins. So I would be running at them with Travis Etienne. And that in turn should equate to a nice game for David Long, who this year he's gonna stay.
Yeah.
Can stay on the field because we need you on the field, Dave. You're not much good to be standing next to the defensive coordinator on the sideline while I'm looking up who Andrew Van Ginkel is.
Right. Yeah, that was definitely a weird start to last season. And some of it had to do with Jalen Phillips, right? Like, because he was in and out of the lineup, and then they were replacing Phillips with Van Ginkel. And if Phillips was in the lineup, they'd put Van Ginkel at off ball. It was a complete disaster to try to figure out. And luckily, again, new defensive coordinator this year for Miami. I think it's Anthony Weaver is his name, and Jalen Phillips is in there, but Jalen Phillips is not going to affect David Long this year the way that it was last year with Andrew Van Ginkel in the mix as well. Phillips, by the way, also supposed to be on a pitch count for week 1, just to throw that out there as it comes to my head. So not somebody that I'd be starting in week 1 either.
Wasn't it Fangio in Miami last year?
Last year was Fangio, yeah.
So he's just going from city to city, screwing up our linebackers.
Yeah.
What he does now.
That's what he does. Yeah,
that's awesome.
He hates
moved
IDP.
On to Philly, and he's like, "Hey guys, guess what? Day before the season, Devin White dead."
Yeah, that's another one, right? So yeah, for anybody that's listening that didn't see that news, Devin White is out for Friday's game against Green Bay. Nakobe Dean is slated to start, so I feel comfortable starting Nakobe Dean as well. Feels like it'll be a full-time role there. But yeah, Devin White, I mean, that stock price just keeps tumbling more and more and more. So yeah, make sure you get those lineups set properly there. All right, last linebacker start for me is another one similar, I guess, to Nakobe Dean as well, where he's filling in for a potential injury, but has a chance here to be a starter for a little bit. Henry To'o of the Houston Texans going against the Indianapolis Colts. So Christian Harris is on injured reserve, at least for the first 4 games, I believe it is, but could be longer. But Hanky Two Toes, as we were calling him last year, should be full time. In D'Amico Ryans' defense. This was typically a 2 linebacker defense last year. It was a zone heavy defense as well. So that was really friendly for our linebacker tackle efficiency. And then going against the Colts, who are going to be a run heavy team potentially with Jonathan Taylor, with Anthony Richardson. And again, like you said, potentially the same kind of mindset here that Jacksonville might have against Miami, where you want to keep that Houston Texans offense off the field. So I think there's definitely some room for guys like Azeez Al-Shaair and Henry To'o to feast this week for the tackle potential, and somebody that wasn't drafted in a lot of leagues, but somebody that we could pick up off of the waiver wires and potentially start over some of these guys that we're looking to avoid this week.
Oh, there are not words for how much I like Azeez Al-Shaair this year. I thought I loved him last year, and then he went to Houston and got reunited with D'Amico, and I'm over the moon.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
He's my bae.
Nice. Yeah, we literally talked about him last week. He was my dark horse pick to be LB1 this year, to surpass Foye Oluokun, who's been LB1 for 3 straight seasons now. Yeah, it's definitely possible. So feeling pretty good about him as well. Let's get into the linebacker sits here, Gary, and start things off in Cincinnati, where you have Logan Wilson versus the New England Patriots. What don't you like about this guy?
Logan Wilson is an excellent NFL linebacker. He's a decent IDP option. This week he gets the worst matchup just ever. New England's offense is awful. It stinks. They have Ramondre Stevenson, And yeah, that's about it. I mean, unless you want to try to talk yourself into Antonio Gibson being good, which okay, whatever. And they have a couple young wide receivers. Yeah. There's going to be an awful lot of 3-and-outs. I just don't see the tackle opportunities being there. I just if he can get 8 total tackles this week, I think you got to call that a win if you're a Logan Wilson manager.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm with you. Like, I'm not as excited about Logan Wilson really for the season as a whole. Like you said, he's been a good NFL player. Like, he's had some, big plays and stuff, but his biggest asset really has just been playing time and being healthy for the most part. Like, as far as tackle efficiency goes, he's been well below average. For people watching on the YouTube there, you see his player card, minus 20.7 tackles versus expected, which was a 6th percentile mark. And for the most part, that tends to stick. And you'll see in his previous years as well, he's right around expected. He's not like some super producer like a Foye Oluokun or anything like that. But he could still be startable. It's just a matter of when you're comparing him to a lot of the other options. We want guys that potentially have more tackling ability to them as well. All right. So next one, this has been kind of one of the bigger shakeups here from this offseason, but somebody that I'm definitely avoiding this week. It's Ernest Jones of the Tennessee Titans. Huge question mark after getting traded from the Los Angeles Rams to the Tennessee Titans. His status, was as a locked-in IDP starter. That very much is in question right now, right? He may not even be a full-time starter on his new team just yet. Especially being new to the team, I think that absolutely could allow for a period of time where he's just being eased into a larger role. Considering this being a new defense for him to learn, and you got established starters on there like Kenneth Murray, who I have ranked higher than him this week. Jack Gibbons is also on the team. There's already been talk about Ernest Jones being on a pitch count this week, which I think makes perfect sense considering the situation. But that, means Jack Gibbons is also not in starting consideration for me this week. It's really only Kenneth Murray that I think in Tennessee is worth the start. And, looking at the Rams, it's a barren mess at their linebacker core. I think Troy Reeder is going to be the green dot and be the guy that I'm comfortable starting. That's the one that I've had to put into a couple lineups in really deep leagues, and I'm going to roll with it. But for Tennessee, for Ernest Jones, he is somebody that I'm absolutely benching this weekend and just waiting to see what the usage is and waiting for him just to get into a full-time role really before I'm comfortable starting him.
Get the Eagles on the phone.
Yeah.
Trade for Devin White, Rams. Free Devin White. I don't even care if he's good. I just want him to have a threat. I know he's better than Troy Reeder. I mean, I don't know how good Devin White is, but he's better than Troy Reeder. I've seen enough of Troy Reeder to know that.
I know it's crazy.
What they didn't even really trade Jones. They gave him away. They're like,
gave him away for nothing. Yeah, literally nothing. It's really, really surprising. I don't know why they wouldn't just hold him for the rest of the year and leave him as a potential for competing team. But interesting decision by the Rams. I don't know what happened there, but they obviously hate him. So Gary, I'll let you cover a couple more matchup based picks here. Then I'll just cover like some general situations that I'm avoiding until we get more clarity. So it wouldn't really matter who they're playing necessarily. These like guys that I wouldn't be putting in week 1 lineups if I can afford it. But let's look at some matchup guys first here that you have on the list, starting with Lavonte David.
Yeah, I'm not about this is matchup play. I don't know what to make of that Washington offense yet. Sure. And it wasn't a good matchup last year. I don't know that I trust their ground game. It's going to be interesting to see what David's role looks like playing with KJ Britt as opposed to Devin White. Although I think it's going to be pretty similar to what it has been, which unfortunately means more coverage, more roaming around, more as opposed to where Britt I thought was a good value this year because I expect him to. Todd Bowles is going to attack with one of his linebackers. And I think that linebacker more often than not is going to be Britt. I mean, I love Lavonte David. I wore his jersey to the Kings Classic Buckets Division draft this year. Hall of Famer, absolutely. But I just don't love him this week. And I could say the same thing. I don't know that I have ever loved Tremaine Edmonds. He's a guy, I mean, he's made a lot of money and he's certainly – would seem to have the tools to be, this elite top 5 type guy. but it's just never really come together for him, at least from a production standpoint. And I don't trust Tennessee's offense. I don't trust the ground. I don't trust the Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears duo to be the kind of fantasy asset for linebackers that, say, Derrick Henley smashing through the defensive line or running into a
Right.
linebacker was. So, and we've consistently seen TJ Edwards outproduce Edmonds. I mean, I'm starting Edwards. Edwards is a guy that
Yeah.
you'd have to be loaded at linebacker to consider. So, but I have a couple Edmonds shares, and I'm seriously considering, because I don't know that he finishes inside the top 25 this week, and I know that that's how he was drafted.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's entirely possible that you have more starters that are, better plays than Tremaine Edmonds. He just, like you said, he just hasn't really been that effective as an IDP through the year. Just really kind of bland production across the board. So not somebody that I'm necessarily overly excited about, other than the potential for playing time. That is really just it for Tremaine Edmonds. So as for me, as far as my sits go, I'm looking at like situations where I'm not fully trusting the linebacker situations, and Atlanta is one of those situations right now, where we really received no clarity from during the preseason. With again the coaching staff coming over from the Rams. The Rams have a history of not playing their starters in the preseason, and that seemed to transfer to Atlanta as well. We don't have like obvious full-time options on the roster in Atlanta either. Like Caden Ellis, probably the safest option for me, but I have him as like LB 38 this week, just because I don't fully trust it. There's been a lot of talk about rotation this offseason with this group, and they got Troy Anderson in there, Nate Landman fighting for that LB2 spot. Like this would definitely be a situation to kind of wait on for me before I'm trusting anyone in IDP starting lineups, just because of that potential for a rotation and guys not being full-time players and not knowing exactly how it's going to shake out. So week one is not a week where I'm going to trust the Atlanta linebackers. The other one, and this one pains me to say because I love him, Ivan Pace Jr. of the Minnesota Vikings. I have him as LB 54 this week. He finished the season strong last year. He looked to be heading into a breakout season in year two, but after that first preseason game where it was Blake Cashman wearing the green dot as the lone full-time linebacker, there's, to me, plenty of reason to kind of temper expectations for Pace this season, barring a Cashman injury, who, to be fair, he is currently questionable for week one. But Pace isn't likely to be a full-time starter if Blake Cashman's healthy, right? And you consider Brian Flores's tendency to rely on three safeties last season, and the likelihood to do so again this season, considering all the personnel is returning in that regard. So until we see the usage across a full game, for me, Ivan Pace should be benched in most IDP lineups this week, assuming Blake Cashman plays, right? And I know, we didn't see that typical one linebacker deployment in the preseason, but at the same time, we didn't see all three safeties in the game either. Harrison Smith sat out in the preseason. So when Brian Flores has all his options there, I imagine that there is going to be a one linebacker system. I could be wrong, but I'm not willing to risk it week one.
I love that the first preseason game came literally days after Ivan Pace went
Oh,
on NFL Network and said, "Oh yeah, I'm wearing the dot."
yeah.
So everyone's like, "Well, he's wearing the dot, or not."
Yeah, it literally came, a day after I finally was like, you know what, I'll give in. I have had Blake Cashman ranked ahead of him all offseason. I'm gonna give in. He said he's wearing the dot. I trust him. He was one of my guys coming out of the draft that year when he was a rookie, and I moved him up. It was like LB 19 or something like that, and literally less than 24 hours later, I had to move him all the way back down again because I was like, damn it, he screwed me over. So, uh,
Liar!
yeah, it was painful. So some of the other ones, just quickly, that I'm kind of looking at here, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Frankie Louvu. So JOK in Cleveland, Frankie Louvu in Washington. So JOK, if Jordan Hicks plays, I just worry about him playing full-time snaps. I don't think he'll be a full-time player in a man-heavy defense, and specifically this week going up against potential pass-heavy offense in Dallas as well. If Jordan Hicks is out, I feel a little bit better about JOK, but we know that Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski for that defense, it's been a very heavy rotation at the linebacker position. And then for Frankie Louvu, what it is for me, really, I worry about his usage. It just seems to, like Dan Quinn is looking to blitz him a ton and line him up on the defensive line, which we know is terrible for tackle efficiency. So outside of like best ball and big play leagues, Frankie Louvu is someone that I'm kind of sitting week one to see how that usage shakes out and how much I'm willing to trust him going forward. But am I reading the JOK thing wrong, Gary? You're a Browns fan. How comfortable are you with JOK heading into the year? Because I am at least worried about the snap.
Especially if, like you said, Jordan Hicks is healthy, which Hicks was, had an undisclosed injury for a big chunk of training camp in the preseason, and Hicks does have an injury history.
Yeah.
But I don't, JOK just continues breaking my heart because I've loved him since he was coming out Notre Dame. I was like, in the right situation, this kid could be a star. And it just seems like either he's hurt or the scheme fit isn't great, and what are you going to, I love Frankie Louvu is one of my favorite players in the NFL. And his going to Washington was okay for about 45 minutes until Bobby Wagner signed. And then it was like, yeah, all right. And then their edge rushers are Dorrance Armstrong and no one. Yeah. So they're going to turn him into a glorified edge rusher and murder his IDP value.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the fear there for sure. And then one more linebacker sit that I mentioned very quickly. I've talked about it a few times, but Trenton Simpson of the Baltimore Ravens, I'm not necessarily like as worried about this one, but there's enough concern there that he's not like one of my favorite plays this week. One of the things that the Ravens showed us this preseason was that Malik Harrison got kind of that preferential starter treatment in that he started the game and left with the rest of the starters while Simpson kind of stayed in with the backups. There was no Roquan Smith in there. So Harrison also wore the green dot. Now, part of that could be that Simpson is just not going to wear it in season. So why bother in the preseason type of thing? But it's also at least another sign to kind of pay attention to. The other part of it is that there's no guarantees that it's going to be a full-time role for Trenton Simpson if he is the LB2 next to Roquan Smith, right? Just because Patrick Queen was full-time last year doesn't mean that the coaching staff necessarily views Simpson as being capable as that same type of player, especially considering, a significant lack of experience in the NFL, right? So they also brought in Eddie Jackson this year, who is a safety, so different positions, but he's a starting quality safety who joins two very good other safeties in Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton. So the Ravens have been a team to use more dime personnel previously, especially when Patrick Queen was kind of developing and getting experience in the NFL. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went back to that this year, especially against Mahomes and the Chiefs, when you want to be able to defend the pass more than the run, and more DBs makes more sense than more linebackers. So we'll at least find out quickly. Thursday Night Football, obviously, for those listening, that'll be tonight. But we could put Simpson in games maybe later if we find that the usage is safe. But why risk it week one is kind of my point, right? We want to see how this shakes out. I would just rather wait on Trenton Simpson 1 week.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily overreact to week one because, again, like you said, they are playing the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And but I do also agree with you that once the Eddie Jackson signing happened, I was like, oh, that's not good for Trenton Simpson's value. I'm speculating, but I think we're going to see a lot more 3 safety looks out of the Ravens this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm with you 100%. Yeah. All right, let's get into the defensive backs. We'll do these ones pretty quickly. They're relatively easy to kind of to figure out here. So Gary, we'll start with one of your top starts here for defensive back. Who do you like in Chicago?
Oh, Kevin Byard. I can't quit Kevin Byard. I can't help it. I don't know. I just can't. And he keeps falling in drafts. I mean, I got him in some ridiculous spots this year. I close my eyes and I imagine Will Levis throwing an interception to Kevin Byard in week one. And that's pretty much all it takes for me. And I'm like, okay, roll him out there.
Okay. And revenge game too, right? Former Tennessee Titan going up against
absolutely.
Right. So yeah.
Kevin Byard has been known to intercept a pass occasionally.
He has been known to do that. Yeah. So I'm with you. Kevin Byard, kind of another guy that's kind of flown under the radar, but was really good last season. Again, another guy that played on two different teams and was able to maintain, really strong production throughout both of those stretches. So, like Kevin Byard, I also have Donovan Wilson of the Dallas Cowboys as one of my starts. So, again, different defense than last year with no Dan Quinn. But I think that helps Donovan Wilson because he should at least be a 100% snap player. This year, he was only in for, I think, 77% of snaps last year, was around like 80 something in 2022. So I really like his chances to at least be a full-time player this year. He's another guy that kind of flew under the radar this offseason, but I think that's somebody that I feel pretty comfortable with and a really nice tackler at the safety position. So going against the Browns, I like Donovan Wilson this week. Who's your next safety up on the board here? Oops, do I have a card for her? Oh, there it is. Yeah.
PJ Locke's a guy that was available cheaply in IDP drafts that I think is going to have a really nice season playing as the box safety in Denver. I expect, given the struggles that the Denver Broncos had last year stopping the run, and that they can't, that we're going to see a lot of Kenneth Walker from the Seahawks on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have great Alex Singleton racks up stats like they're going out of style. Yeah. But he's also the kind of guy who tends to tackle people 5 or 6 yards downfield. It's the Anzalone effect.
Right.
So I think not only do I like Locke this week, I think PJ Locke is going to see. He's the kind of guy that's the reason why I wait on defensive backs every year. Because I can load up at linebacker and load up at defensive lineman. And sure enough, I'll come back in round 23 and a PJ Locke will be there. And I'll grab him. And if he pans out, I'm a genius. If he doesn't, I don't care. It was a 23rd round pick. Yeah. Right. I'll throw him to the waiver wire and grab Von Bell or whoever.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing, right? Like the Denver safeties are interesting one. So I guess I'll ask, who do you like more, I guess, rest of season? So there's PJ Locke and Brandon Jones in Denver. Do you have a favorite of those two? Is it Locke?
I actually like Locke better, and I know I'm in the minority on that.
No, it's honestly, it's a defense where I think it could go either way. I think it's not like a very obvious defense one way or the other for one guy to get more box snaps than the other. Like I think it's going to be pretty close, and it's a situation that Locke can definitely outperform Brandon Jones. I don't think that's out of the question at all. I also put Julian Blackmon in here of the Indianapolis Colts as one of my starts. Again, I think a nice, safe option at defensive back. And what I like about him is that he doesn't appear that he's going to lose that box-heavy role from last season in Gus Bradley's defense, which was rumored throughout the offseason as they were trying different players out there. And Julian Blackmon was playing deep for a little bit, but the preseason at least showed us that Julian Blackmon should be the favorite to come down closer to the line of scrimmage and be inside that more tackle friendly area of the field there. So I like Julian Blackmon quite a bit. Next player on our list was Jalen Petrie. I think I put him on here, so I'm sorry to do back-to-backs. I'll just kind of quickly roll through.
That's fine.
So Jalen Petrie I put on here as well. So for anybody that didn't listen to like the preseason recaps or anything, like we know that Jalen Petrie didn't have a great year last year, especially compared to his rookie season, right? But a lot of that had to do with the scheme change, him playing more deep and things like that. And he played deep in his rookie year as well, but the defense changed specifically. And that regression was naturally going to be expected for him, but he's definitely somebody that after the preseason, I'm a lot more sold on for this year to kind of bounce back a little, not to the, 130 something tackles area that he was as a rookie. I don't think he'll ever do that again, but at least have a better year than he was last year. And somebody that I feel pretty comfortable with. Like he is expected to play more in the slot this season, which will help his tackle efficiency. He did that in the preseason. And the team released his primary competition for that slot role with Desmond King being released. And I think he's picked up by the Chargers. So no concern about him coming back either. So feel pretty good about Jalen Petrie this season.
Yeah, I think he rebounds this year too. I think people just got his rookie year. I mean, he racked up such gaudy numbers that people got carried away. And he was never going to back those numbers up last year. There was no way.
Yeah, it was literally the easiest regression call of all time, but people were still drafting him as the first safety off the board well ahead of everybody else, which was just crazy. One more start at the safety position. Who do you like from the Seattle Seahawks?
Rayshawn Jenkins. I know that everyone was crazy about Julian Love
Yep.
this summer, but I honestly, it would not surprise me at all to see Rayshawn Jenkins wind up with more fantasy points than Julian Love by the end of the season, because I think we're going to see Rayshawn Jenkins closer to the line of scrimmage more often. I'm not saying we're going to have, one guy's going to be the box safety all the time and one guy's going to be the deep safety all the time, because really no one does that anymore. But I do think Love is more likely to play a majority of those deep safety snaps, whereas Jenkins is going to be cheating up toward the line of scrimmage. Terrell Dodson and Jerome Baker, I wouldn't exactly call the Seattle linebacker situation settled, which should mean more tackle opportunities for those safeties. And, it's got a good matchup this week against the Denver Broncos. I was quite happy because Julian Love in most drafts was going top 10, top 12 DB. I'm perfectly content to wait until DB 2025 and grab Jenkins.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love Rayshawn Jenkins, his potential to, like you said, lay down closer to the line of scrimmage. And yeah, Julian getting all the love, pun intended there. But I do like Rayshawn Jenkins quite a bit. All right, we got one more group here to go through. It's going to be our defensive back sits. We'll go with your first guy on the list here, Gary. You have Von Bell of the Cincinnati Bengals.
I'm just staying away from the entire Bengals secondary this week because the New England offenses, do they have a passing game? I mean, how many forward passes are they going to complete? 5, 4? It's going to be like that game in Buffalo where it was all windy and no one could throw, except there won't be any weather. Because the Patriots are just that bad. I understand why they're not starting Drake May. Why throw the kid out there to get murdered?
Yeah.
I feel bad for Jacoby Brissett because they're like, oh, that's okay for you to go get murdered. Enjoy yourself. But no, I'm not. With the exception of maybe like Trey Hendrickson and maybe Sam Hubbard in a deeper IDP league, I want no part of the Bengals IDPs this week. Where are the tackle opportunities going to come from? Tackling the punter?
Yeah, it's a fair way to look at it for sure. I mean, I as much as I want to see Drake May on the field, like I don't want to see Drake May on the field right away because, like you said, it's not a great situation for a rookie. And yeah, I think the Bengals are going to start off hot. They typically start off slow, but I think with everybody healthy, we'll see what happens with Jamar Chase. But I think the Bengals could steamroll them this week. So I like that call. You got another one here. That people might be, upset about, but Antoine Winfield Jr. You got
throw down the gauntlet.
Yeah.
I don't love the matchup against Washington. Yeah. Now, granted, their passing game will probably be better this year than last. Although Sam Howell, I mean, he racked up passing yards last year. It's not like he didn't throw for yardage. Winfield is a guy I expect. He's another one of those guys I expect we're going to see regression this year. I expect we're going to see fairly significant regression because he had never put up a season close to what he did last year until last year. And his big play numbers from last year are just not sustainable. No. 6 sacks and half a dozen forced fumbles are not sustainable for a safety. It's just not going to happen. So I love Antoine Winfield Jr. as a player. I mean, I love Antoine Winfield Sr. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I can remember when he played at Ohio State. But I think there are going to be a lot of people who made Winfield the first defensive back drafted over the summer who are going to be very disappointed. They're going to be looking in December when he's hovering around, 85 tackles and the big play numbers are down, wondering what went wrong. Nothing really went wrong. It's just that last year was more exception than rule.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Again, we see the turnover at safety happen every single season, and you see the numbers on there. Like they were excellent last year, but it's so unstable for defensive back production that we just can't bank on it year to year. Like there's, I think, literally one player who continues to be, at least for the last 3 years, has been consistently among the top scorers. It's been Derwin James. That's been pretty much it. Everybody else is in and out of there, like a rotating door. So I could definitely see that being the case here with Antoine Winfield, as well, as good of an NFL safety as he is. You got one more sit here for us this week out of Carolina. Who do you not like?
I'm not loving the matchup for Jordan Fuller. I actually like Fuller this year for the season. Yeah, I like the role for him in Carolina. Carolina's another team where the off-ball linebackers don't exactly blow you away. Mm-hmm. Josie Jewell will probably be productive right up till he gets hurt.
Right.
And Shaq Thompson is Shaq Thompson.
Right.
Shaq Thompson's like a poor man's Tremaine
Yeah,
Edmonds.
it's a good
You, the talent's kind of there, but the numbers just never quite
right.
seem to be. But just this week, that Panthers Saints game is probably going to be one of the most unwatchable games of week one. So if you have red zone or Sunday ticket, you happen to live in the New Orleans or Charlotte area, just do yourself a favor and change the channel.
Yeah.
Just, you can thank me later.
Yeah, as excited as we are for week one, and there's a lot of great games. Yeah, it's not the best one on the list, that's for sure. So for me, what I did, I just really kind of lumped a few guys together here, and really it wasn't necessarily about matchup, but again, just situations that I'm looking to avoid this week in case people weren't necessarily paying fully attention to the offseason and don't want to get caught off guard here in week one. Ifatu Melifon was starting with him in Detroit. Had a great end of the season last year. He was amazing. He had all these interceptions and things like that. And he was a great IDP for the IDP playoffs. Doesn't look like he's going to be a starter in week one. He seemed to have lost that starting role to Kirby Joseph. And because the Lions are moving Brian Branch to the safety position while still trying to figure out who their nickel corner is going to be. So it looks like Ifatu Melifon was going to be the odd man out. So just make sure that we're not keeping him in lineups this week. The other one is Jamal Adams out of Tennessee. So Jamal Adams, again, obviously a player that's had IDP relevance in the past, and people, are constantly looking for more from him because he's done it in the past, but doesn't look like he's going to be a starter either. More of a sub package player, it seems like, is going to be the option. I think Quandre Diggs and Amani Hooker are going to be the starters in Tennessee at safety, which leaves Jamal Adams really only coming on in certain situations, which is not really IDP relevant. So just something to keep an eye on there. And the last one, Darnell Savage in Jacksonville, not somebody that a lot of people are putting in starting lineups, but somebody that people are aware of, know that he signed in Jacksonville, seems like an obvious choice to be the starter based on, early depth charts and stuff like that. So people might have picked him up in those deeper leagues and maybe rolling him out. He looks like he's going to be playing a part-time role, most likely behind Andre Sisco and Antonio Johnson, who is a second-year player for Jacksonville. So Darnell Savage is definitely somebody that I'm not looking to start either, despite probably being a decent matchup against Miami. I don't think there's enough snaps there for Savage to make an impact for IDP lineups this week. So yeah, that's kind of my list there. But that's it, Gary. We are primed and ready now for week one. Thanks to your help, and a big thank you to everyone, obviously, who tuned in as well. Hopefully that was informative for you all. But again, let me know in the YouTube comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Do you prefer the start sit format, or do you like the game by game version of last year so that we can cover as many IDPs as possible? I know, there's not nearly as much IDP information as out there as there is the offensive side, though we are definitely getting a lot more IDP stuff out there, which you love to see. So I'm happy to make sure we give you guys what you're looking for. Let me know if you would like the game by game stuff going forward. But I think for week one, it makes sense to do the start sit. But again, I'll include the link to our rankings page in the episode description. So feel free to drop start sit questions in the YouTube comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate you all. And also a huge thank you to Mr. Gary Davenport. I can't thank you enough for previewing the first week of the NFL season with me. I know you are busy, so it really means a lot that you are spending time with me on week one eve. And before you go, please let everybody know where they can find all of your work this year, because I know it's at multiple different places.
Oh, Football Guys, Bleacher Report, The Athletic. Your best bet's probably just follow me on Twitter at IDP Sharks, and I tend to shamelessly self-promote myself there as much as humanly possible. So, and it's absolutely my pleasure. I look forward to doing at least one of these a year with you, John.
So do I, Gary. It means a lot that you're coming on here, and I always enjoy getting your insight and talking to you and following your work as well throughout the season. I everywhere that you do it. So I thank you for making yourself available and for putting so much information out into the world. I find it very helpful for me and for everyone. So thank you again. And then as for me, Week one IDP rankings will be up on the site by the time you're listening to this, and every week. Also, new this year, Monday morning on the YouTube channel, I'll be recapping all the key IDP happenings from Sunday's game, as well as like early waiver wire targets to targets. So make sure you're subscribed there, turn on the notifications so you don't miss it. And we'll have the massive IDP fantasy report in article form on the website Tuesday morning, looking at every single IDP from every single game, their usage, my thoughts, waiver targets, all in one article. So please make sure you check that out on pff.com as well. Also next week, helping me preview week 2, Bobby Reynolds of the IDP show will be on with me, and I'm very much looking forward to that as well. So until next time, peace out.